Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a book by Genna Sosonko, and it's called Evil Doer, Half a Century with Viktor Korchnoi. Now, Evil Doer refers to what the Soviet Union establishment thought about Viktor Korchnoi after he stopped playing for the Soviet Union, after he left the Soviet Union. So what this book talks about a lot is about the period where Korchnoi defected to the Soviet Union, and that would have been in 1976 at a tournament in Amsterdam. It talks about his life. I don't know how Sosonko is so close to so many of these famous players. And get me wrong, he's a good player himself, but he does actually mention that he was a second to Korchnoi at the start of the book. So that might be an explanation. But he seems to have all these really, really deep conversations with Bronstein and Korchnoi. Was he a journalist and potentially paying them for these conversations? I don't know. Or they were just friends with him, or they just respected him because he's an intellectual, famous writer, very intelligent guy. So therefore they respected him because it seems like he had a lot of conversations. But obviously that's great for us because then we can read about what Korchnoi thought about all these other different players. I wasn't aware as well, reading this book, that Korchnoi actually defected after Sosonko had already defected. So Sosonko actually defected to the from the Soviet Union using this Israeli exit visa. And Korchnoi himself, after a 1974 interview where he disparaged Karpov, was kind of denied opportunities by the Soviet chess establishment. So that led to him believing that he was unfairly treated and therefore his career would be better enhanced if he moved abroad. And that proved to be the case because he got his best results after he left the Soviet Union. It was a very interesting case point because I think it's almost like he was in that kind of environment where there were so many good players that he couldn't stand out. So maybe it shows that you're actually better off being a big fish in a little pond. So when he goes to Switzerland, he's like the big star, right? Rather than a little fish in a big pond. Soviet Union, to some extent, he was outshone earlier in his career by people like Mikhail Tal, people like Boris Spassky. They all became world champion. Arguably, you could argue Viktor Korchnoi outshone them later on because of his exploits, the closeness of the matches with Karpov in 1974 and 1978. Later on, he got crushed in 1981 in Italy. What the book sort of establishes is he was slightly past his best by then. So it talks a lot about his, about his career. Essentially, there's a lot about that period in the 1970s, which is the most interesting period of his career. Obviously, there's also some photographs as well. There's some great pictures. Here we hear him talking to. There's one here where he's talking to Yasser Serouan, a tournament in Holland, and there's also one where he's talking to Garry Kasparov. Garry Kasparov he worshipped because Viktor Korchnoi was known as someone who was a great calculator. He was regarded as a great calculator by his peers, but Garry Kasparov was even on a different level to that, in terms of pure calculation. So maybe he kind of regarded. I've spoken with some super grandmasters, and often they regard Kasparov with a kind of sense of awe. So possibly that was the case with Korchnoi as well. Bear in mind that Korchnoi never quite achieved even 2700 FIDE, right? Kasparov got past 2800. So you could argue Kasparov was on a different level even to these people like Korchnoi. Anyway, yeah, overall it's a great book. I mean, it's a great book. It really talks about one of the most interesting personalities in chess ever. It also talks about his famous work ethic and how he achieved this greatness after he left the Soviet Union because he was driven by this motivation to keep working on chess. He would always approach positions from a position of naivety, like he'd never seen that opening position before, even if he'd analysed it 100 times. Sosonko talks about that a lot. Overall, I would say this book is probably like a 9 out of 10 or even a 10 out of 10. I'd say this is slightly better than the Bronstein book, which is a very similar type of book, which really goes very deeply into the personality of Korchnoi and so on. Sorry, just getting a notification on Facebook. I hope that doesn't come up when the video is recorded, right? Yeah, so it says here, Viktor Korchnoi was one of the leading grandmasters of the 20th century, coming within one game of winning the World Championship in 1978. His battles with Karpov for the world crown were among the most important chess matches ever played. A man with a unique and in many ways tragic life and career, Korchnoi's defection to the West in 1976 was a major event in Cold War politics. Grandmaster Genna Sosonko was Korchnoi's coach and second during tournaments and Canada matches in 1970 and 1971, and a close friend of Korchnoi for decades. Indeed, Sosonko's emigration to the West in 1972, which is described in detail in his memoir, had a key impact on Korchnoi's decision to defect 4 years later. Yeah, so that's essentially what the book's all about. You know, Sosonko's like, well, he's a good friend of Korchnoi. I think a lot of these people, like Korchnoi and Bronstein, respected Sosonko, not just because he's a good chess player, but also because he's more of an intellectual type. He's an intelligent guy. A lot of chess players are very focused on chess. They can't really talk about events outside of chess. Sosonko clearly could and still can. But yeah, overall a great book, I would say. Really, really good book. I must admit, I read this when I was at this tournament in Budapest, and you know, it was a highlight to read this book when I was waiting for my games, you know, to start. And obviously, you get this kind of fighting spirit from Korchnoi coming through the pages, even as no actual chess positions in the book. But that's very typical for a Genna Sosonko book. And yeah, Korchnoi. Yeah, I mean, the only time I ever watched Korchnoi play actually was in a PCA Intel match, and that would have been I think maybe he played Lloyd's Bank and he possibly played Ida Man, but I wasn't there at those tournaments. Possibly also Istanbul Olympiad. I was there as a coach for Bermuda, but I do distinctly remember watching Korchnoi play a match against Morozevich in a PCA Intel Rapid Grand Prix. That would have been around about the mid-1990s, around about 1993, 94. Morozevich had just scored like a record score in winning Lloyd's Bank Masters as a virtual unknown. He'd scored like 10.5 out of 11. He sits down opposite Korchnoi. I'm sitting in this auditorium. I believe it's somewhere like Central London, somewhere in Central London, maybe Hammersmith or something like that, where they later had the Kasparov-Kramnik match. Not the same place though, not the same auditorium. But anyway, I'm sitting down in this building and there's like hundreds of spectators. And I'm thinking, well, this match will be fairly pedestrian. Obviously, Morozevich is the coming spirit, you know, he's a coming player. He's just going to batter this old guy, Korchnoi, who's just rubbish. The complete opposite happened, actually. It was a very one-sided match. Korchnoi just destroyed him. And I was really impressed with me at the time. And it made me realise, when I'm thinking about it the other day, it made me think, actually, that he was probably, having read this book, he was probably going into that game with a massive amount of motivation. Like this guy, Morozevich, is an up-and-coming player. He's from Russia, this country that I emigrated from. And I really want to beat this guy. I really want to show to him that I'm better than he is. And that would have been Korchnoi to a T. He was a very, very motivated person, very, very powerful personality, and he did rub people up the wrong way as well. You know, I remember speaking to Joe Gallagher, who was a colleague of his in the Switzerland matches, and they both played for Switzerland. He said that Korchnoi would come up to him during the games and he'd say, like, this is the insult I'm going to say to my opponent after the game. He'd basically say, like, this guy's like some sort of patzer. You know, you don't understand anything about chess. You know, this is kind of typical thing you come out with. And you read that kind of stuff and actually kind of, then you start saying it, and you start sounding like an old fuddy-duddy, you know, like I'm like 49 now, right? I was playing all these young kids the other day, and it's very tempting to go, oh, you know nothing about the King's Indian, you're so weak, you have no understanding, you just play moves really arrogantly, you look like an idiot. Do you know what I mean? But then you just look like an idiot yourself. So, you know, from that perspective, but when you read the book, it actually gives you a very good insight into why Korchnoi was like that. You know, why, you know, and any kind of, you know, you actually have a more positive outlook on Korchnoi. That's what I kind of felt like after I read the book. So, yeah, overall, very good book. Please leave your comments down below. Please like and subscribe. I'll probably better end the video there because I tend to babble on a lot. But, yeah, thanks for watching. And I will leave a link down below so you can, if you want, interested in purchasing this book, please purchase this book. It's certainly worth getting. It's by Elkin Ruby. It's Viktor Korchnoi, Evil Doer. It's a great title as well. It's a great title for a book. That's partly why I was attracted to this book. And the picture on the front cover is brilliant. So a great book overall. 10 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10 at worst.